Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner, and the floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Kiwatnik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back from the constituency break from everybody. Just a couple of questions before we actually wrap up. I did have some clarification I was looking for in regards to a figure that the minister had put out our last day of sitting when he's spoken about the Channels project, and we're kind of in relation to Channels project, but the Indigenous kind of set aside work that would potentially be put aside any kind of work, and the minister had made mention of the figure of 10%. And I'm just wondering if, for clarification, if the minister could then define what the department's definition of an Indigenous owned company would be.
The Honourable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and then it's for the member for Kiwatnik, the question that he had, it's the minimum of requirement was like minimum of 10%. So that means it's very broad. It also includes like if not just ownership, but say participation when it comes to employees, organizations that will be able to, are working on this project, especially that close to First Nation communities. That's our policy. And that's, again, a minimum. So we're hoping that when it comes to the $50 million that are going to be allocated to apply for First Nation, it can be one big company, it can be a number of companies that will give some advantage to allow First Nations to compete on some of the bidding process when it comes to the tenders of a major project with $600 million. It's a lot of work out there. And so we're allowing this happen so that there's abilities for them to apply when it comes to this grant money to up to $50 million. And this will actually allow them to either invest into equipment or invest in training, whatever they apply for. This is what the amount is for. So we're hoping that participation could be a lot greater when it comes to the incentive out there. And I always, when I always talk to First Nation communities, they always say, we want to be partners. We want to hand up, not handouts. And so this gives an opportunity to have a hand up when it comes to building their business opportunities going forward. This project would be a good example of when it comes to amount of participation for a First Nation community. This is good experience and good to have on their part of the projects that they were working on, so that they can apply in the future for any other projects, if it's even with provincial governments, or if it's federal government, or if it's local governments, if it's private sector. They have the experience. This is what this is. This is basically seeing money of that $15 million.
The Honourable Member for Kiwatnik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for clarification on what the department defines as an Indigenous-owned company. For example, does a company have to come in having 50% ownership, Indigenous people owning the company versus non-Indigenous people owning the company? What's the percentage of a company to be able to apply for and bid on various work in the department? And what does that percentage of ownership, Indigenous ownership, have to be for them to be quantified as Indigenous owned?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the member there, it's not based on ownership. It could be part of ownership. Our broad definition will actually get you more of a detailed description of the participation of 10%. That would also include employees within a company of 10% participation when it comes to employees. Again, this is a great opportunity, again, for when it comes to the channels of $600 million. Gives an opportunity for people to be, there's going to be jobs. There's going to be a lot of contractors who come there. Again, a lot of contractors are looking for employees. And the fact is, since they're up there, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for employment for First Nations who want to have some experience working for a company. Again, minimum 10% participation will include employees within a company. The thing is, we're hoping that indigenous companies will be formed with this $50 million seed money when it comes to be able to participate on the tender process of this channel work. And again, there's going to be a lot of work out there. There's $600 million for clearing, to digging, to again, it's just basically getting equipment, getting human resources to be there, to be employed. Again, we're hoping that more participation comes from First Nation companies themselves.
The honorable member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for a confirmation then. So the minister is talking about a minimum of 10%, whether it be ownership or whether it be employees. So for example, then, if a company with an employee base of 10 has one Indigenous person as part of their staff, does that then mean they're qualified to be an Indigenous-run organization that can bid on contracts that are set aside for Indigenous communities?
The honorable minister.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we'll be able to table some procurement when it comes to First Nation participation, when it comes to the actual definition of company. Also participation within, you're right, when it comes to the amount of employees that are working within, that is the minimum. The opportunity there is that we will be looking at to, as this project moves forward, opportunities to look at possibly the minimums again and have a different threshold on this. Again, this is all opportunities. Again, that's why we wanted that $50 million seed money for First Nations to apply for this money. This gives a opportunity. Basically, what you need is equipment, because a lot of the tenders that we're going to be having is to do a lot of moving of earth, and this gives opportunities to for First Nations to participate. But we will definitely table the definitions of all the requirements of when it comes to First Nations of a minimum of 10%. And again, we're hoping that we can have companies out there that will have 100% participations of owned by First Nations and employed all First Nations, and this is where the minimum requirement is. And so we'll get that definition to the member.
The honorable member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I was going to give some time to the Independent Liberals, but apparently they're not prepared to do anything here today, so that's the end of the questions for the day.
Okay, so we're out of questions, and we will move on to resolutions. Okay, Resolution 15.2, resolve that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $6,929,000 for transportation and infrastructure capital projects for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.3, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $163,311,000 for transportation and infrastructure, transportation operations for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.4, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $36,327,000 for transportation and infrastructure, engineering and technical services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.5, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $10,183,000 for transportation and infrastructure, emergency management for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.6, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $703,389,000 for transportation and infrastructure, capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 15.1, bracket A, the minister's salary, contained in resolution 15.1. At this point, we say goodbye to the minister's staff as she leaves the table. The floor is now open for questions. The honorable member for Keewatin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that line item 15.1 bracket A be amended so that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure salary be reduced to $21,000.
It has been moved by the honorable member for Keewatin that line item 15.1 bracket A be amended so that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure's salary be reduced to $21,000. The motion is in order. Are there any questions or comments on this motion? Seeing none, is the committee ready for the question? Shall the resolution pass?
No.
I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed to the motion, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, order. In my opinion, the nays have it. The motion is accordingly defeated. Oh. Okay, you got it? Yeah. Okay. Order. Resolve, resolution, one final resolution. Resolution 15.1, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $12,207,000 for transportation and infrastructure, corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supplies for the Department of Municipal Relations. Shall we briefly recess to allow the minister and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department?
Agreed.
Agreed. We will briefly recess. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Municipal Relations. Does the Honorable Minister have an opening statement?
I think we have to.
The Honorable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to be able to make a few comments on the 23-24 estimates and discuss some important initiatives and activities of the Department of Municipal Relations. Before I begin, I'd also like to recognize the hard work of my department staff and the professional work that they do in collaboration with Manitoba municipalities, the City of Winnipeg, the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, the Association of Manitoba Bilingual Municipalities, planning districts, fire services, mutual aid districts, nonprofit and community development organizations, and our many other clients. I know that this good work is also being recognized by the communities and municipalities that we serve. We recognize that municipalities and communities across the province are facing significant pressures that impact the ability to deliver important projects and services that Manitobans depend on, and we are taking action. Our commitments for the coming year affirm our support for municipalities while establishing a strong foundation to grow Manitoba. As we all know, a stronger province starts with stronger communities and supports for affordable, quality services close to home. Our government has increased funding of the municipal operating basket by 28%. This raises the total value of the unconditional municipal operating grant provided to municipalities from $170 million up to $217 million. That is $47 million more than last year, and is the largest increase in the municipal operating grant in a decade. Every municipality will receive a minimum increase of 24% in operating grant funding when taking into account all funding that will be provided to municipalities in 2023. This will form the base to build from going forward. The municipal operating grant formula has been simplified and now includes a revised per capita calculation aligned with 21 census data and a need-based calculation that results in a more even distribution of funding. Smaller municipalities and municipalities in Northern Manitoba are also now guaranteed a new base grant of $25,000 to reflect relatively higher proportional funding challenges experienced. This significant funding will become a permanent part of the unconditional operating base in future years, and we look forward to working with our partners to modernize the funding formula to support the unique needs of municipalities now and well into the future. Our government has committed to a $23.4 million increase to the strategic infrastructure basket, raising the total amount from $137 million to $160.4 million. That is a 17% increase, providing an additional $23.4 million in 2023. This increase is in direct response to the continued economic pressure facing municipalities and impacting the completion of critical infrastructure projects. The increase means the City of Winnipeg will be receiving $89.8 million of strategic infrastructure funding in 2023, up from $75.3 million, while other municipalities outside of Winnipeg will receive $70.6 million in 2023, which is up from $61.7 million. We have also allocated an additional $13.4 million in one-time supports for Manitoba's 5 public transit communities to address operating shortfalls created during the pandemic. Prioritizing our vision of building vibrant, thriving communities where people choose to live, we will maintain expanded funding support of up to $25 million for the Building Sustainable Communities program. It is also provided for up to $9 million the Urban and Hometown Green program as a further extension of the doubling of this program to support pandemic recovery. In fact, on April 27th of 2023, the province announced it has approved more than $9.6 million in Urban and Hometown Green Team programs, grants to support 744 youth employment projects across the province. 2,500 youth are expected to be hired this summer. Our government knows how important these program grants are to municipalities and how Green Team is vital to the importance to continue to support youth employment projects across the province. This year, we also continue to prioritize support for local efforts to strengthen downtown redevelopment and reinvestment. Budget 2023 provides for 4 additional staff of the Office of the Fire Commissioner to ensure effective and efficient coordination of core emergency response programs while maintaining a high standard of accredited training and education delivered by the Manitoba Emergency Services College and Manitoba Fire Service and other emergency services. Manitoba also remains committed to ensure strong local fire protection services are maintained with the continuation of 2 Manitoba Fire Service grant programs totaling up to $360,000 to improve access to training for the reduction of financial barriers and enhances the ability of community fire services to train closer to home. When it comes to community planning, many of us know that effective and efficient land use and planning regulations can help boost economic competitiveness and promote sustainable growth among municipalities. After 2 years of consultation with stakeholders, the Capital Planning Region, or CPR, regulation has come into effect on January 1st of 2023. This builds on the legacy and history of municipal cooperation under the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region. Not only will the renewed version of the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region enhance economic and social development and harness regional opportunities, but it will also improve pathways for investment and economic growth and put the region on the map as a great place to live, work, and play. Our government is dedicated to supporting municipalities across our province. In municipal relations, and our government will continue to help build stronger communities through ongoing education and support for local elected officials, by providing funding to build and strengthen municipalities, and by investing in programs that enrich the lives of all Manitobans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank the minister for those comments. Does the critic for the official opposition have an opening statement? The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and hello to the minister. I'm pleased to have this opportunity as critic on municipal relations to question the minister also on his first time up in estimates in this role. I trust he's had enough time to familiarize himself with the department and will be able to speak accurately to the details of his department and its budget. And I'm looking forward to learning more about the minister's thoughts on the Manitoba Municipal Board, how it's functioning, how long it's taking for permitting, and the impact of the far-reaching powers of the board. We know that municipalities have opposed and continue to oppose the board, so I'll be interested in hearing how the minister is responding to this. I'll be asking the minister to explain his government's 6-year funding freeze to municipalities, and I look forward to learning more about the government position on the illegal goings-on with the building of the police headquarters. The minister will have a chance to explain why his party seems to be protecting criminals rather than calling for a public inquiry, as the city of Winnipeg has requested the province to do. And I'll also ask questions about infrastructure funding for water and roads. Municipalities are the heartbeat of our province. People live, work, play, and raise their families in the cities, towns, and rural communities across Manitoba. As municipalities struggle with increased costs, costs that have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and in some cases much more during the 6-year funding freeze. This government has not been showing up for municipalities. Thawing a freeze in an election year is an obvious ploy, but also doesn't go far enough to help municipalities catch up. How do municipalities attract new businesses for economic development or new family doctors if they're years behind in public transportation investments or infrastructure developments? I look forward to hearing the minister's explanation and if he will be able to commit today to not freezing municipal funding in the future if his party should have the chance to govern again. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I look forward to the interesting questions and answers to unfold in the rest of the afternoon.
We thank the member for her opening comments. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for the department and the committee supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 13.1 bracket A contained in resolution 13.1. And at this time, we invite the minister's staff to join us at the table, and we ask the minister to introduce the staff in attendance when he's ready. The Honorable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have with me to my left here Bruce Gray, my Deputy Minister. Got Anna Polakar, Brian Shank, David Neufeld, Nick Kulik, Don Hallett, and then got a Graham Rankin, my Special Assistant at the very end.
Thank you for the introductions and welcome everybody. According to our Rule 78 bracket 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put separately on all resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister undertake to give a list of all technical appointments in his department, including names and titles?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two technical staff would be Graham Rankin, Special Assistant, and Sarah Jansen, the Executive Assistant.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Can the minister undertake to give an organizational chart that lists all employees and program areas?
The Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we have organizational structure with the name of staff as well, or just an organizational structure? To clarify.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Well, the roles and program areas, yeah, the employees.
The Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I'll table this document and see if this is what the member is referring to.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I could also say it's page 14 of the document here as well. I don't know if that'll be helpful for a member opposite here.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Can the minister give a list of all current vacancies in the department, both as a number of vacancies and a percentage?
The Honorable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The vacancies as requested, it's 74 FTEs, and that's 22% as a percentage.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
And is the department planning on filling those vacancies this year? I noted that on page 10 of the budget, it shows that the actual number of employees will fall this year. But what's happening with those vacancies?
The Honorable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, of course, I know that our government intends to fill them on a priority basis, of course. We know that government is not exempt from the labor shortage that has been experienced right across every aspect of the economy. So, of course, government is no exception to that. We know that our government has been insistent on helping the economy in general with filling the labor gap, and I'm sure the member opposite is familiar with our plan on the provincial nominee program to bring in and use immigration as one tool to help fill the labor gaps. I know my colleagues in charge of that is actually sitting at the table here today, and we know that it's been a very good initiative to help fill those gaps in our labor pool, whether it's in government or outside of government. We know there's a lot of folks outside the country that are very qualified for some of these positions, and provincial nominee program does prioritize people based on their ability and their assets they bring to the province and to the labor pool in general. So I know that, like I said, our government is insistent on filling these gaps on a priority basis, and we do always appreciate, and I appreciate all the good work that's done by the good folks sitting with me here today and everyone in the department that works together to help serve the municipalities. And I, of course, want to welcome my critic to the role. I know we kind of started around the same time, and this is our first time in estimates together, so welcome to the role, and it's an exciting role to be in where we can work together to benefit of municipalities right across the province. Often Manitoba has one large community, is my mind. You know, with 1.3 million people, we do have our unique challenges, but I think we have a lot of unique opportunities to work together here and start by serving the communities that represent the people of Manitoba.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to clarify, with 74 FTE vacancies in the department, if I hear that labor shortage is an issue, so I want to clarify if that would explain, let's say, the bulk or the majority of these vacant positions, and if there is a plan to get these positions filled, and I guess also if the minister could speak to the impact on the work of the department to have such a large percentage of vacancies.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, while labor shortage often is seen as created by a demographic issue we have in government as well, a lot of the baby boom generation has retired out of the positions that they held prior to that. So of course, that's one of the reasons that we see labor shortage, and certainly a shortage of workers right across the economy, and it would explain some of our vacancies that are in our department and of course across government in general. So we find that the highest vacancy rate would be in the assessment services, but I mean a lot of that can be dealt with by improved technology, satellite imagery, as the members opposite are very aware of use for assessing properties, and of course use of tablets in the field instead of having a person go out into the field and a notebook and pen and paper, and that way and come back to the office they can do things in real time. So there's always ways to create more efficiencies with the technology we have, and of course, like I said earlier, I mean it's a priority to fill on a priority basis these FTEs. You know, certainly the demographic issue is not only specific to Manitoba. I think it's countrywide, probably continent-wide in many cases, probably worldwide, at least in some developed parts of the world, where you have a demographic that's reached a certain age, and that's typically retirement age, and that's where a lot of folks have gone, and now we're starting to replace folks at the other end. And of course, we know that immigration will help us do just that. I know that we as a province, we as a government are very proud of the immigration reputation we have as a province. Back to 1998 with the provincial nominee program being created, we know that, and now most recently being more modernized and being adapted to a more 21st century application. But we're very, very excited to see that this will be an opportunity to bring folks in to the province, not only to fill a labor shortage, but then to add their contributions outside of work, but in the community and through culture to the greater part of Manitoba. We see immigration coming not only to the city of Winnipeg, but throughout parts of rural Manitoba that traditionally hasn't seen as much immigration, at least not in recent history. That's really nice to see that ability to have that diversity, not only in the city of Winnipeg, but in communities as far south as the U.S. border, all the way up to places like Thompson and other types of communities where immigration is not only welcome, but very much needed.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the minister mentioned that the largest vacancy rate is in assessment services. Perhaps he could give us a breakdown of those 74 FTEs by department or by kind of service area. That would be helpful. So perhaps how many are in the assessment area and how many are in the other departments.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a breakdown here for a member opposite. It's my only copy. If it's okay with the member opposite, we will get a copy for her, but endeavor to do that as soon.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
I would love to get a copy of it, and it's not urgent this moment. Thank you. I'm going to ask some questions about the municipal board now. Does the minister and his government think the Manitoba Municipal Board is doing well, and are its expanded powers serving the best interests of municipalities and Manitobans?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that most of us know, and I'm sure the member opposite knows, that the municipal board's been in existence for decades. It's a quasi-judicial board that operates at arm's length of government, so that government doesn't make the decisions, the board does, and that's it's been an organization that has done this for some time. I think it's important to keep that to ensure that a set of eyes that are allowed to see or certainly adjudicate on these important matters don't come necessarily right through to government, but have a quasi-judicial board that are able to oversee that and make decisions, certainly to the best of their ability. I know that I can't imagine it being easy to be on that board, making decisions that are very important and certainly not only impact individuals, but impact the greater communities that this individual lives in, or individuals live in. So I say that again, it's been in existence for decades. It's a board that's quasi-judicial, and it's been, operates at arm's length from government so that it can give its own opinion on matters that affect the community. And I think that's a long-standing tradition here in the province.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2019, the province released the findings of a planning, zoning, and permitting review. And this report contains some numbers on approval times for occupancy, building, permits, and others. Can the minister provide us with updated statistics?
The Honorable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the member, for the question here. So just a point of clarification, I know that the planning timelines and appeal processes fall under our department, municipal relations, that's through Bill 37. The other permitting times would be through, I believe, the Minister Teitzma's department. But we do have, and I understand that as of recently, the Manitoba Home Builders Association has a report out really seeing an improved ranking for Winnipeg, the city of Winnipeg, where most of the challenges we've seen in the past come from the city of Winnipeg. And that planning review has been made available, and if the member opposite is interested in it, we will certainly endeavor to get her a copy of that review.
Before proceeding, I'll just remind members participating in the committee that we need to acknowledge people by their constituency or their department or the ministry.
It's okay. Rookie mistake.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was so willing to be corrected. I would appreciate getting a copy of that report. Can the minister speak to more generally then to, how many permits were issued under 14 days, how many between 15 to 30, or how many took longer than that?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, my understanding, the municipal board will only hear about issues if there's an appeal made. So municipalities wouldn't necessarily be reporting every planning request, but they certainly would have the municipal board would certainly hear about any of the appeals related to those that are outside the time frame that are considered acceptable. So I know municipalities have a lot of requests all the time, so the municipal board would be the one referring to the appeals coming from the ones that are no longer in compliance with respect to the timelines.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Before we continue, were we supposed to pause at 4? Was that the... Okay. All right, thank you. When the minister's government introduced Bill 37, we know it was universally opposed by municipalities, and Bill 37 expanded the hand-picked municipal board's powers and gave it the ability to overrule municipalities' land use decisions. Municipalities continue to oppose the municipal board. They've called it anti-democratic, said that it's skewing in the balance in favor of developers. So can the minister explain, has he considered listening to municipalities on this and stripping the additional powers from the municipal board?
The Honorable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Bill 37 was certainly introduced to create clarity and certainty for development in our communities across the province. We know that in order for communities to plan long-term, they need the ability to have consistency and provide long-term planning through consistency to the communities and, of course, to all those who are interested in helping develop the communities. Providing a standard right across the province, I think, was important. And let's be honest that municipalities still have a great deal of autonomy. They can, as long as they're within the time frames that are allotted, and they have up-to-date bylaws and up-to-date standards and processes, it's not much of an issue. The only time any of these processes become an issue, or at least seized with the Manitoba or the appeals board, is when because it's no longer within the standard time that was set out by government. So really, the municipalities have the ability to plan, they have the ability to do what's best for their community, but having some standards and consistency across the board is important as well. I think we can find that delicate balance between those two. I know I have greatest of respect for the Association of Municipalities and the work that they do, and of course the municipalities right across the province. And I know I'm sure my critic has met with a number of folks from municipalities, as I have, and we know that it's an incredibly challenging role, especially at that local level. But you know, we as a government want to make sure that there's consistency across the board, that Manitobans know that development can continue in their communities, and that certain timelines are met, making sure that the communities can grow in a fashionable time and in a reasonable time frame.
The honorable member for Wolseley.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like the minister is kind of pleased with the direction of the municipal board and the additional abilities, the additional powers that the municipal board has now. But, you know, there's very specific examples that are concerning, where we see that the far-reaching consequences of expanding the municipal board's power over land use decisions has some negative impacts. So I'm sure the minister is aware of the situation at Assiniboine Links, an assisted living facility in West Winnipeg. It's being sold. The new owner is converting it to rental apartments. Residents there have been told they have 3 months to move out. So one of those residents is a man named Walter Kasmar. He's 98 years old. He's lived at Assiniboine Lakes for 7 years. And he's obviously upset because he thought at his age he'd found a place where he could stay and to live out his life. And now has to do something else. But what we know is that Assiniboine Links wouldn't have had to be sold if their original plan to build the 199 unit apartment complex beside it hadn't been nixed by the Manitoba Municipal Board after the City of Winnipeg approved the project. So the intention was that revenue from the apartment building would have covered the costs of running the assisted living facility, but without that revenue, the owners had to sell the building. So can the minister explain this? Does he believe that the Manitoba Municipal Board acted in the best interests of Manitobans like Walter Kasmar in this instance when they overrode the City of Winnipeg's approval of this project?
The Honorable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on any decisions, individual decisions made by the municipal board, as it is a quasi-judicial board at arm's length from government. But I know as a government, we do encourage that all parties come together and work together to come to a solution that would benefit everybody, including folks in the community. Like I said, it's a quasi-judicial board, and I would hesitate to comment on any decisions that they've made with individual cases pertaining to the appeals made at the municipal board level.
The Honorable Member or Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On April 20th, 2023, during the Families Committee of Supply, the total monthly EIA benefits for the general assistance category was required as $936. Please correct the record to reflect that it's $857 as the total monthly EIA benefit for the general assistance category. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank the Minister for those comments and clarifications. The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
You're done? That was it? Okay. Sorry, we're plotting our next question over here. Thank you very much, Chair. So just to follow up on the question that I was asking about the Manitoba Municipal Board and overriding the decision by the City of Winnipeg, can the Minister provide us with a list of hearings that the Manitoba Municipal Board has undertaken since it was given expanded powers through Bill 37?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given the fact that it is a quasi-judicial board, I would have to ask that board and request a list of that nature from the board, and if the member is okay, we would endeavor to get that to you. We'll request on my critic's behalf.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
Yes, thank you. We would definitely, I would really like to see that list. Does the Minister know offhand how many times the Manitoba Municipal Board has overruled municipality decisions?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we know the municipal board has been around for decades, so it has adjudicated over a number, and quite a large number of cases throughout its time. So, I mean, that would be a very large number. I know often the municipalities, sometimes that the board will side with municipalities, sometimes they'll side with the other party. It really depends. The decisions that are made by the municipal board are made based on the evidence at that time at that particular location. So of course, municipalities are taken seriously and well respected at the board level, of course, knowing that their input is very important. But again, it's based on evidence at that time and evidence of what is in the best interest at that particular time, given the evidence available to the board and to the members.
The Honorable Member for Wolseley.
So I certainly hope to actually get a number of how often the board has overruled municipalities, particularly, as I said, since they were given expanded powers through Bill 37. And it sounds like I can appreciate that that the minister has said that he will get me that list, but and the list of hearings. I guess my question is this information publicly available? And if not, does the minister think that this would be in the public interest for everyone to be able to see where these projects have been overruled and how many of them and what this impact is for municipalities across the province?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the question from my critic here. A couple of things. First of all, with respect to the number of appeals since Bill 37 has come into force, I know that it's been only since 2021, so there hasn't been a whole lot of appeals, but I'm sure we can make sure that that information is reflected in the list that is provided to the member opposite when that becomes available from the municipal board. Also, as far as making the list more public, I know that right now there's trying to balance that with privacy issues and of course the wishes of the municipality, and making sure that all those involved are respected while being transparent. So the intent is to have it more public facing, but in the meantime making sure that the municipalities are okay with the information that is provided, as of course respecting the privacy of all the parties involved. You know, that certainly is an issue in this digital age of privacy versus transparency, and I think that's always an important important debate to have, but it's also important that we get it right. So making sure that those involved, their privacy is respected as well.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Okay, thank you for that, Minister. I imagine, and thank you, Mr. Chair, I imagine that municipalities, when they're making these decisions, that these often are on the record and that there would be a public record at individual municipalities when they have approved projects in their community. And so somewhere they're like, if that's no longer approved, I mean, I'm just curious about how private that actually is in those individual communities. But I look forward to seeing the list when it's available to me. One thing I noted is the commitment of your department to reduce red tape. And so, you know, is there, looking at what's involved in overriding a municipality's judgment around a project seems to take time and money and perhaps be not in line with the idea of reducing red tape. So I wonder what the minister's thoughts are on that, just when you look at the redundancy and the time and costs involved in this.
Point of clarification for
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Point of clarification for member opposite, referring to the municipal board's decision making with respect to municipalities. Is that what the member is asking?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Yeah, what I'm asking about is the municipal board's ability to cancel a project that a municipality has approved. And so going through that process takes more time. There's a redundant aspect to it. And how does that fit in with your department's goal of reducing red tape?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with respect to Bill 37, certainly Bill 37's idea was, of course, to give timelines to municipalities on these types of proposals to make sure that it's consistent across the province, of course, but also to make sure that the municipalities then are able to react accordingly to make sure that their internal processes are more efficient when a proposal comes across their desks. So that's really what Bill 37 is about. But also gave an opportunity for fairness for applicants, whereas in the past, if you couldn't, the buck stops with the municipality. At least now you have an independent municipal board that they can take this to if there's an issue. You know that sometimes projects and municipal issues can be quite political, and it's nice to have an independent board that can then adjudicate on behalf of that project. So again, there's two ways of looking at that. Bill 37 creates that standardized timelines, but it also gives fairness to the applicants in the communities who are looking at certain developments or certain types of projects that likely, in the minds of the applicant anyways, are going to benefit the greater community, if not now, at some point in the future. So that's really the underlying idea behind Bill 37.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister just explain to me how the members of the independent board are selected and appointed to that board?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, the applicants are for the board are selected through the agencies, boards, and commissions through an OIC process. So that process for this particular board is inconsistent between now as it was in, say, the previous NDP government. So they'd be a similar process for assessing and hiring, I guess you could say. Qualified applicants. You know, ABCs, or the agencies, boards, and commissions, go through the person's and the applicant's qualifications. We know a lot of them have extensive municipal municipal experience. Some have legal experience, so it brings together a whole group of folks from different walks of life with excellent experience, which is very useful in this particular municipal board.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there actually a public list or any list of what kinds of qualifications board members need to have, or the application process and what they should be showing?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, that information is on the portal, the agencies, boards, and commissions portal. And if member ops would like, we can get you a copy of that link to take it to and see what what is requested of applicants before they apply. So anybody can apply, of course, assuming they meet some of the requirements. And I would endeavor to get that link to my critic.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister's going to be very busy following up with me with this list of things, so appreciate that. I'm going to ask a few questions about municipal funding now. Can the minister explain why his government froze funding to municipalities for 6 years, and does he think this was a mistake?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would correct the record. I mean, first of all, it's our government, when we formed government in 2016, that created predictable basket funding. I know that that's been something that municipalities have been asking for a long time. Previous to our government, and the previous NDP government, it was my understanding that it wasn't a very simple process of funding municipalities, and project by project was decided on by the provincial government, or largely because they're such an important partner in funding projects, it became very convoluted and very difficult to follow. So as we came to government in 2016, one of the initiatives that my predecessor had, and I believe that would be Minister who is now of Indigenous Relations and Northern Relations, was in that role, and she endeavored to make sure that there is consistent, predictable funding. As the member knows, and we've talked about this a little bit here, predictability is very important for long-term planning in any community. And of course, that's why this past, earlier this year, we, as a government, provided $47 million in increase in operational funding. And through Budget 23, now that $47 million is actually, to clarify, predictable, ongoing funding. So that's not just one time. That's going to be continuing on into the coming years. In addition to that, we've also created our funding capital to municipalities at the tune of just under $23.5 million as an increase to municipalities. So again, let's just correct the record. There is this government has been very cooperative and worked very closely with municipalities right across Manitoba over the years, particularly after COVID. We know the COVID pandemic has created a lot of additional pressures. With that coming inflation and all kinds of other issues, supply chain issues that have created economic challenges in our communities, not only in Winnipeg, but we see it outside the perimeter to communities right across the province. That's why that increased funding is so important to make sure that municipalities are able to meet the challenges of a post-pandemic world. And that's really where we're at. And I know, very proud to say that I worked very closely with the Association of Manitoba Municipalities on this. They were actually at the announcement very, very supportive of all that we've done here to make sure and try and make our municipalities whole. I know the member obviously would know that the City of Winnipeg received a bump up of $7.5 million to address the pothole issue. And anyone who knows Manitoba in the spring, that it's not spring season, it's pothole season. It is the nature that of the beast, so to speak, that this is what Manitoba is, and this is a challenge that we face every single year. So hoping that $7.5 million extra would give the City of Winnipeg or relieve some pressure on them as they endeavor to provide services to their citizens, but also make sure they continue that important work of filling and fixing potholes that often traumatize all of our vehicles as we drive through not only Winnipeg roads, but of course roads in and around the perimeter as well.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister's intent on defending his predecessor's record on this, but when the minister talks about predictable funding, I think I'm not sure that what municipals had in mind was being frozen at 2016 levels predictably for the next 6 years. That is what their experience is, and that's what they've been talking to me about. So predictable, yes, but also harmful, and has led to many municipalities having to put a lot of projects on hold or delayed, things that now are just costing significantly more money when they now are seeing an increase in funding for the first time. So I hear the minister doesn't think that was a mistake, how things were done. But this current funding increase that's just coming in an election year, does this make up for the 6 years of frozen funding? Can it make up for that?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just remind Member Opposite that, it was our government, like I said, that introduced the predictable funding. And of course, throughout COVID, there was an increase in almost doubling of the infrastructure funding going to municipalities. And including that, we talk about some of the transit issues, and we've advocated with the federal government and actually delivered, not only for provincial money, but federal money as well. We want to make sure we understood that, post-COVID, we experienced unprecedented inflation. And I think that's been the world over. I don't think anyone in any municipality in Canada or across most of the world would be in any different situation. So of course, we want to make sure $47 million increase was given this year. I mean, this is, when we announced it, inflation still high, inflation still an impact on projects in municipalities and of course budgets right across the province. $47 million, just shy of $23.5 million in terms of infrastructure funding. And remember, these are permanent increases. So these are not one-time, one-off increases. These are not, pick and choose projects as you wish. I know in the previous NDP government that did happen quite often, and there was no consistency. There was no rhyme or reason to funding. Perhaps some of it was politically motivated. I don't know. But in this case, giving municipalities an increase so that they can use it however they see fit and however the municipality believes it would benefit their citizens and their residents, I think that's very important to remember that. That's what this is about. Permanent increases to municipalities. We're going to continue to work with municipalities. I know that members opposite, we've actually, my colleague and I, the Minister of Justice, have written a letter to the federal justice minister asking for the federal government to step in and help with back pay for the RCMP to our municipalities. We know how important that policing is, as an example, in our communities. We want to make sure that our communities are made whole. And unfortunately, the federal government hasn't done that yet, and we're hoping and very hopeful that they do. Because we believe, as a government, that we want to make sure that of all the funding baskets available, or in this case, operation and infrastructure, that policing, federal policing, in such an essential time when crime is at a fairly high rate compared to it was just a few short years ago, making sure that Manitobans know that their federal government is able to have their back, and we don't think that's happening right now. We as a government want to stand behind Manitobans and make sure that policing is covered in this province so that Manitoba municipalities can be safe and secure and they can continue to grow and prosper, in addition to that $47 million and the $23.5 million increases that they received just this year.
The honorable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad the minister brought up RCMP funding. I am going to ask some questions about that in a little bit, but just to finish off here a little bit on the municipal funding, the minister mentioned kind of politically motivated decision-making, and that, I mean, that's what stands out to me is that a freezing of funding to municipalities for 6 straight years and then an increase in the budget just a few months before a provincial election seems pretty politically motivated to me. So I guess my question for the minister is if he can commit, if you know his government, if his party forms government again after the provincial election, can he commit to not freezing municipal funding in the future or cutting municipalities' funding in the future going forward?
The honorable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, look, and I've said this before, that this increase in funding is made permanent, and we're going to continue to work with municipalities on their needs and as they endeavor to serve their citizens in the best way possible. We are very committed to making sure municipalities are made whole under previous NDP governments. Let's face it, when we formed government, the NDP government at the time had racked up a considerable deficit in, well, good economic times. There was no COVID pandemic. There was no record inflation. In fact, recall borrowing rates and interest rates were at almost record lows, rather than right now we're seeing increased pressures on everybody who borrows money. And so I think that it's important to remember that the previous NDP government was not at all a good partner to municipalities. Their motivation was more political. We, in this case, want to make sure that after COVID, when record inflation is hit, you've seen a record once in 100-year pandemic, major disruptions because of these things, that municipalities were given an increase, and we as a government will endeavor to continue to work with them and advocate on their behalf. Gave money, $47 million in operations, that's an increase, $23.5 million in capital increase, and of course, fighting to make sure that the federal government does what it's supposed to do to help make our municipalities whole with respect to the back pay to RCMP.
The honorable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the minister forgets that the NDP also had 10 balanced budgets 10 years in a row before experiencing. Are we heckling in committee now? I'm not sure that he can point to the same for his government, but that's not what we're here to debate right now. I hear the minister saying that the current money committed to municipalities in this budget is a permanent, which is good, really good news for municipalities. But I haven't heard a clear answer if there's a commitment to not freezing that again in the future. If he is to be part of government in the future, can municipalities count on annual funding increases that are predictable and that they won't be facing another 6-year freeze if the PCs form government again in the fall?
The honorable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to piggyback off the comments, the preamble by the member opposite. You're right. Our governments, the current government and the previous NDP government, were facing very different circumstances. Absolutely. The NDP government had record low interest rates, a good economy, there was no pandemic, and no inflation, not to the rate we see today. So absolutely. In fact, our government right now has a lower deficit than the NDP did when times were much, much better. So that is a stark contrast between our two governments. With respect to the municipalities, we've said, like we said before, we're going to make sure that we're going to work with them and to address their financial needs. It's very important to continue that really good relationship. Myself and my predecessors have developed very strong working relationships with the AMM as one example, and we know that we continue to work with them as they're the largest advocacy group for municipalities in the province, and continue to work with all municipalities. Every municipality has its own unique set of circumstances, its own unique set of challenges, but we want to make sure we give them the flexibility with this this funding model that is predictable, it's permanent, and they know what they're going to get year by year. Unfortunately, in the previous NDP government, they didn't have record inflation. They didn't have an unjust war in Ukraine, which has wreaked havoc on a lot of our supply chains, and we're seeing this right around the world. The world that the NDP had was much more stable, and they still managed to rack up record deficits. It wasn't until we came to power that we were able to fix a lot of their problems, and then we faced a serious issue. We all know that's called COVID-19, and then of course all the other issues that followed COVID-19, which made governing much more difficult and much more disruptive. And today we still have a lower deficit than they did when they left government.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I note that the funding freeze to municipalities started as soon as the PC government came into power and before the pandemic. And so, you know, that freeze over 6 years was very dramatic for municipalities. And that's certainly, as the minister noted earlier, as the new critic, I have been out in communities talking to mayors and reeves and council members and doing my best to network and make those connections. And mostly I'm hearing a lot of concern that, you know, people are relieved right now because there's an immediate kind of fix to some of their issues, but they can't make up for that deficit. Projects that were put on hold costs triple now because of, as you said, as the minister said, because of supply chain issues, et cetera. So I guess my final question on funding rate at the moment on municipal funding is, the minister keeps referring to the funding model. Has the department looked at a new model for funding municipalities?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, when we formed government in our early years, we did create this basket funding model. And most recently, we've further updated that model, simplified it even further. So it's based on population and needs-based funding. So it's much more simplified than it has been in previous years. And I think that's important and predictable for economic development in our communities right across the province. I know, like the member knows full well that our government has taken a number of initiatives to make sure that life is more affordable for Manitobans right across the board. We've increased the basic personal amount to $15,000. That's brought so many Manitobans off the tax roll, knowing that they keep their money in their own pockets. Of course, a reduction in the retail sales tax, the sales tax increase that was done by the previous government, I might add, we made sure that that money goes back to the people in our municipalities, in our province in general. We know that we trust Manitobans with their money. We know that Manitobans are the best folks to make decisions on how their money is spent. The education property tax reduction, we know that that's been something giving a lot of money back to particularly rural municipalities where you have a lot of farming activity. A lot of farmers have received a considerable amount of money back. That's putting money back in the people who feed us and feed the world. So I think that's important to remember that, that's where our government has been focusing on, as well as, of course, we know there's increased to municipal funding, but we've also, in my previous department, I put on my previous hat as the Sport, Culture, Heritage Minister, created a $100 million Arts, Culture, and Sport and Community Fund. And we know that $100 million goes a long ways in helping these community groups. And a lot of these groups are scattered throughout the province, whether they're a sport group, some kind of cultural group, or some other group that fit the parameters of that funding model, which again, $100 million of investment is tremendously important. We know previous government, despite their tax increases, left tens of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance in that sector of sports, culture, and heritage. And unfortunately, it's going to take some time for that industry to recover. And where $100 million thinks goes a long way into helping do just that. So, Mr. Chair, I think members opposite know that our government is committed to making life more affordable by putting money into municipalities and making sure they have the ability to be strategic and have predictable funding models that make it easier for them to plan out their future and do what's best for themselves and their residents, and make sure that Manitobans are well served by the initiatives undertaken by our government.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that, that was a lot of information not related to this department, and bit of a distraction, I think.
Order, the hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise.